things certainly do things. And maybe some of you have heard about this incident which just happened a few weeks ago. There was a Jaguar parked in London in front of a bank, or in front of a building, and the building melted this Jaguar because it bundled the lights with this concave surface. So clearly, this is an example of things doing things to other things. And you may think about, well, what do I care about a Jaguar? I don't own one anyway. But things get a little bit worse, and things do also things to us. A fabulous example are speed bumps, and who hasn't worried about them? But probably they are not always as big as this. You can think about speed bumps as delegated forms of control. So instead of placing a police person there, measuring your speed, giving you a speeding ticket, what you can do is you can delegate the control into this artifact, and it will slow down your speed. And actually, when I contacted Tom, who did this picture, and asked him whether I could use this picture because I found it fabulous and found it on Flickr, and he said, yes, please use it, because this speed bump really interferes with my human agency. Because they put it very closely to where he lives. And so whenever he has to take this route, he either has to take a different car, or he has to bring some wooden blankets to come over the speed bump. So this clearly is an example of how things can interfere with our human agency. Another example, which maybe some of you have encountered on your way to get here, are exit or entry doors in the airport. Basically, you can go through them only in one way, and this is just another example of things really interfering with what you can do. But at some point, things changed. Things not only did things, they started to act. And doing is not the same as acting. And you may clearly think, well, that's a little bit of philosophical nitpicking, and I agree, but that's how I earn my living. So, agency requires something more. And what it requires is basically three things: interactivity, autonomy, and adaptability. Once things exhibit these three characteristics, they can start to act. And clearly, nowadays, the agency, the interactivity, autonomy, and adaptability of different artifacts is on the rise. And you may think of drones, and here you find examples of military or civil versions. You may also think of robots as partly autonomous beings. On the right-hand side, you see Arma 3, which has been developed at the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology, where I'm based. And on the left-hand side, you see a more humanoid version even, by Henrik Schärfe, who basically has a robotic twin with whom he together gave a TED Talk in Brussels. But probably the beings that have most agency, the things that have most agency, have been in fiction. And this is HAL 9000, which you may remember. So the important thing about HAL 9000, the sentient onboard computer, at least one thing that I think is particularly interesting, is that it has been invisible. So what clearly is the case, if we leave fiction for a moment, is that algorithms have really emerged as very central agents nowadays, which are highly interactive, adaptive, and autonomous. And you can just think about the algorithms which are lying behind algorithmic trading, or you may think about the algorithms, the self-learning algorithms that basically detect deviant behavior when being run over surveillance material. So they don't only figure out what deviancy is, they define it in a way, self-learningly. So what is crucial is that agency depends upon knowledge. Things not only do things, they also know things. So to let me summarize, nowadays we live in a time where things produce knowledge, things use knowledge, and things can even act upon knowledge. And if you compare the speed bump with the algorithms, you will notice it's a difference. The speed bump is just a form of delegated control. Somebody built his intention into the speed bump, but the speed bump doesn't know anything about you. That is very different when it comes to algorithms. So what is happening now is that humans turn from subjects of knowledge into objects of knowledge. And you may think, well, you know, that's not all that new, and I agree, because I'm a trained psychologist, and in social science and statistics, humans have long been objects of knowledge. On the left-hand side, you see some statistic tables from the Austrian monarchy, and on the right-hand side, just an example from an experiment. What is new, however, is that humans become objects of algorithmic knowledge. And this is happening to all of us increasingly. When we are being online, we are increasingly being tracked, profiled, read, and known. And this is happening, of course, all the time. But what is important is that we are increasingly out of the loop of action and comprehension. We don't really understand what's happening anymore. Maybe some of you or most of you do, but in generally, I don't know it, I don't understand really what is happening online. And the background of this slide is an artwork by Doris Graf, who is a German artist. I just came across the artwork a few weeks ago at the Ars Electronica in Linz. And it basically shows you very lightly how we are being tracked and read and profiled, and we become this shady picture, this shady person who's just being categorized. And now comes the crucial move. What if knowledge were power? And of course, you have to have one philosopher quote at least, and a Latin one even. So, and this is by Bacon, and he wrote, for knowledge itself is power. And you may disagree that knowledge really is power, but what we can clearly accept is that there is a relationship between knowledge and power. And algorithms clearly have emerged as very central agents of knowledge and power. And one of the authors who has probably most interestingly thought about the relationship between knowledge and power is Michel Foucault. And on the right-hand side, you can see the panopticon, which was basically an architecture and building in which you had a watchman in the middle, in this tower, and he could look into all the prison rooms. So the prisoners would never know whether they would be watched. The crucial point is not only that you have this circular building, where you have one person in the middle in the tower watching into all the different cells, but additionally, he himself is invisible. So the prisoner himself never knows whether he or she is being watched at the moment. And that reminds you of hell, but it may also remind you of the latest PRISM scandal. And if it hadn't been for that person, we would probably not been made aware of all these very strong socio-technical coalitions of knowledge and power that may be observing us, but may as well not be observing us. But nonetheless, we are basically not aware of it. We don't know it. And one of the things that we should have learned from this incident is really that we need to watch the watcher, that we need to look back into the tower in the middle of that. And I agree this is not always clear, but that is something we should strive forward. So here's the challenge. What we need to do is we need to reclaim agency, power, and knowledge. And what I argue basically is that we have three different options of doing it: critical usage, critical design, and critical governance. And these are three different strategies, and none of them on its own will be enough. But if you combine all three of them, we may get into a better future, and we may be able to prevent and to basically retain some of our basic civic liberties. Let me start with the first one. The term that I want to propose to understand what critical usage may mean is epistemic hacking. And of course, here again, epistemic in philosophy means related to knowledge. So epistemic hacking, the term that I'm promoting, refers to the practice of understanding and contesting unjust distributions of knowledge, power, and agency over human and artificial agents. So what may this refer to? Think back to the picture, the pictred, the artwork, which I showed you before. What the artwork basically shows us only, it makes us aware how we are being tracked, read, and profiled. But how should we go about it? What should we do about this being tracked and profiled? How can we contest how we are being read? So what happens is we are being known, but we don't know how we are being known. And we need to change that somehow. And a colleague of mine has rightly phrased it in the following question: how to read in what ways we are being read, how to guess the manner in which we are being categorized, preempted, and foreseen. We need a new hermeneutics, a new way of sense-making, that allows us to trace at the technical level how the algorithms can be read and contested. So the task one, and now I get back to you, is that we need to develop and harvest the skills and competencies for epistemic hacking. We need to understand what is going on and how we can contest it. But of course, we don't want to leave all the burden to the users. That would be unfair. So we also need to change design. And basically what we need are more tools for transparency, understanding, and contestation. It means using such tools and designing such tools. There are lots of tools around, but I'm just going to give you two very quick examples. The first is called, and that's been developed quite a long time ago already, Track Me Not. And it's basically nothing else than a browser extension which obfuscates your search queries by creating noise. So whenever you search something, the most common search queries are added to your search query. And that makes your signal and turns it into noise. So it becomes more difficult to understand and to basically profile what you're doing. A more recent example is Ghostery. And what it basically does is it tracks the trackers and gives information about the companies interested in your online activities. And you would be surprised how many there are, okay? So the second task, if we have lots of designers in the room, which I hope, we need more tools and systems that enhance transparency and support epistemic hacking. We need more tools that basically give us insight and make us understand how things are happening so that we are able and basically have the means to contest this. The last point, and this is really important as well, is governance. Because we can do all sorts of nice things. If the governance doesn't prevent us, it doesn't help us in retaining, in basically claiming our civic liberties, we are not lost, but it's getting more difficult. So governance, basically there are 4 pillars of governance: hard law, soft law, education, and ICT design. And in the last 2 tasks, I basically already referred to the 3rd and the 4th pillar, to education and IT design. So now I'm going to focus on hard law and soft law. Hard law basically refers to binding legal instruments, where soft law refers to codes of conduct. And it may be the case that we need, and we very clearly need these 2 tools also to guide us into a better future. The first question that we need to ask is, where do we want to delegate knowledge and power to artificial agents, and where do we want to regain human agency? We may simply decide that we do not want to have algorithmic trading, and we don't want to delegate certain decisions to algorithmic or artificial agents. We may not want to risk our pension funds to algorithmic trading. Or we may want to decide that we don't want to have killer robots. We don't want to have certain tasks delegated to robots. And that's a decision-making that needs to be done by all of us, and that needs to be enforced by hard law. And only once we have decided where and where not want to delegate, then we can decide how to delegate it, how should we best do it. And I just want to mention one initiative that has been launched by the European Commission 1.5 years ago to really explore how governance may be changing in our digital age and our hyper-connected era. And that's the OnLife initiative. We published a manifesto, and you can find all the information basically on the website, just to let you know that that governance bodies are interested in changing and understanding how governance is changing nowadays. So this leaves us with the 3rd task. We need governance that restores and restains fair knowledge-power balances in our socio-technically entangled world. So we have human and we have artificial agents, and they all are very fine, and many things are useful, but we need to understand which tasks to delegate where. So let me end with the take-home messages, and now I get back to you. So I'm going to summarize, and we basically have 3 tasks ahead. The first task for us as users, and we all are users to some extent, we need to practice epistemic hacking. We need to understand how we are being tracked, read, and known, and we need to be able to contest this if we want. As designers, we need to create and develop transparency-supportive interfaces. We need to support us ourselves, but also others, in understanding what's happening to us online. I'm not trying to argue that everything is evil and all personalization is bad, but as long as we are not understanding what is happening, we are basically lacking knowledge and power. And finally, as policymakers, we need to restore and retain just knowledge-power balances through deliberate socio-technical governance. Thank you very much for your attention.